This one for Fastenal, just to kind of give a basic overview, they're a distributor. And so what they're going to do is they have fasteners as their biggest product line. And that's kind of been their bread and butter for years. And so if you think of screws, nuts, bolts, these kinds of things, I'm not an industrial guy, obviously, but these are the type of things that you need to move the assembly lines forward to get all your manufacturing done. And so if you look at this chart here to look at their kind of end market profile, big into manufacturing. So they're going to be cyclical like a lot of other industrial companies. And so, they deal with like OEMs and MRO. So what's OEM and MRO? OEM, original equipment manufacturers. MRO is maintenance, repair, and operations. So these are very, very much highly industrial. If you think of OEM, it could be anybody from, maybe a Boeing. I'm not saying that these are companies that are customers of Fastenal, but just to give an example, could be like a Boeing who's producing aircraft, or a Toyota who's producing vehicles. These type of big OEMs that are really producing these huge things. And they have all these ancillary end markets too, whether that's construction, non-residential construction, all the way down to even like government and schools will be customers sometimes. And so for Fastenal, their big strategy has been to go into really national accounts. That's kind of been their game lately. And so what that means, they've had two different types of locations. They've had branch locations and they've had on-site locations. So the branch locations are kind of more this traditional physical, like if you're working for an OEM or you're working as like a road contractor, as an example, you might go into one of their branch locations and see all of the different things that they have. So to talk just briefly about some of the products that they might have, they have the fasteners, like I said, that makes up about 30% of revenues. They also have safety supplies, which had a huge boost in COVID. You had, if you think of N95 masks and all the other kinds of things that we had COVID related. So that makes up a big part of sales. So does janitorial. And then they do a little bit of tools. That's about 8% of revenues. But kind of within that basket, you'll have all these different types of product needs, depending on what your end market need is. And Fastenal is one of the leaders in doing that as a distributor. So they've kind of moved away, not to say they're moving away completely, but more on focusing on on-site, which is vending, which we've talked about in the past as well, where if you're a national account, and again, I'll just say, let's say you're Boeing, I have no idea if they're customers of Fastenal or not, nothing online to say that they are. Maybe if you're doing that as Fastenal, you put a vending machine inside Boeing's facility. Now the bolts that they need to put a wing together, they can just go to the vending machine, immediately put that into their assembly line and get that done. And so that's been a huge growth driver for them. If you look at their signings, active locations, device signings, these are all metrics that kind of show you how the vending has been doing. They're seeing growth and they're really focusing on it. And that's kind of where they continue to focus. But as you look at what's happened over the quarter, there's been a lot of good news in the sense that they've been able to pass price increases over to customers. They increased revenue 10%, EPS 9.7% year over year. So the demand's there, but problem is we're having supply chain issues, and you're kind of seeing that with so many companies. And for sure, Fastenal is not immune to that. They're making investments. I pop up here their cash flow statement for their latest Q. They're making investments in working capital, trying to increase those inventories. It's something that they're managing and they talk about a lot. I mean, the whole earnings call almost all talked about supply chain and what they're doing to deal with that, because you're seeing that as an issue with so many companies right now.
Yeah, exactly. So do they work primarily with large accounts, or is it something that, a schmo like us can go to a Fastenal store and buy fasteners from them?
Yeah, you can totally. They have these CSBs, is what they call them, and they're basically just these customer branches. So if you're a tradesman, you would maybe go in, and if you really like the kinds of thing they're offering, and it's something that applies to you. As far as like national accounts, those make up 55%, so quite a bit, and it's something that they're focusing on definitely moving forward. I don't know, it might sound kind of like, though they do tools, they don't really compete with Home Depot and Lowe's in the sense that like their revenues from tools are so small that they're not even a blimp in the radar of the big like Home Depots and Lowe's. But interestingly, Home Depot and Lowe's have their own distributor subsidiaries that directly compete with Fastenal. Home Depot made an acquisition back in 2014, did another one in 2020 with a company called HD Supply. And so that's something I think that doesn't really get brought up much as far as the media when they talk about Fastenal.
Mhm.
It is something they do need to keep into mind. I think, we talk about the transition and all the things that are moving with banks. That's exciting. Any company, any industry with supply chain issues, in
Mhm.
my mind, that's very, very interesting because the difference between the winners and the losers has the potential to be huge because you have an advantage now where you don't necessarily, the demand's all there. How much do you really need to spend on marketing? You could seriously just deliver what customers are looking for
Mhm.
and win a customer and potentially win that customer for life. And so in the case of Fastenal, they talk about how they have some manufacturing inside of the United States, which is helping them deal with some of the supply chain issues. So for Fastenal, a big issue is when things are manufactured in China, the port in Los Angeles where these things are coming and being imported is just ridiculously clogged up. I mean, ships will sit there for several weeks. And they brought up something in the call where they talked about something like 35% of their imports. These are inventory that needs to get to customers because of the container shortages and all the congestion in the ports. They were not able to get 35% of inventory into the train rails to get that shipped into their distribution network. And so they had to take that and put that directly on semis, and that's much more costly, takes much more time.
Mhm.
They're saying it's improving from August to September, it improved quite a bit, but they also said month to month, that's a data point. That's not a trend. So it's something to watch moving forward. But think about if you're a company like Fastenal, if your whole industry is dealing with this, all
Mhm.
you have to do is if you have the resources and you have that distribution network in place and you can out execute, I think it will make a huge difference. We always talk about the pandemic as a battle between the winners and the losers. I
Mhm.
think supply chain issues across the board will really highlight that, and you'll start to see long-term differences in financials from the companies who can execute now.